keynote for our inaugural session today will be sounded by Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, the 17th Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Dr. Veerasinghe has had a long association, as many of you would know, with the Central Bank. He served as Assistant Governor as well as Chief Economist and Director of Economic Research, was appointed Deputy Governor in the year 2011 when he was serving as an alternate Executive Director for India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Bhutan at the International Monetary Fund.
Dr. Veerasinghe also served as an academic, as visiting lecturer for the master's degree in economics at the University of Colombo. He's been involved in economic research in Malaysia and at the Australian National University. He's published several research papers in international and local journals as well. Dr. Veerasinghe also worked as an independent consultant for economic and financial matters for multilateral agencies and global investment firms prior to assuming duties as the governor of the central bank in April 2022. We'll look forward to his comments on the impact of DDO on the economy now as he sounds the keynote.
Dr. Veerasinghe.
Thank you, the ladies and gentlemen, for the kind introduction. Thank you, Professor Vatavala and the organization for inviting me. I think I have this topic, DDO impact. Probably I have been talking too much on this, but let me share some views on that. Before that, one personal note, my association with Professor Vatavala, I have known him, I think, for a long time, as far as I can remember. And also, obviously, his speech today, as inspirational, as emotional, as always been. And the first time I encountered him, when I joined the People's Bank as a management trainee in 1990, he was the chairman of the People's Bank. I can remember when we joined the bank, at that age, at that time, the chairman himself came and, at the inauguration, delivered a very inspirational speech, as strong as what he did today. I remember when that was President Premdas at the time. So inspirational that when I joined the People's Bank in 1990 as a management trainee, after 6 months, I was so selected to serve as a management trainee at Central Bank in April. But I didn't want to join the Central Bank. I said I want to continue here because he gave a very inspirational speech. But after some time, then 3 months later, I decided to change my decision and join the Central Bank after I was offered the position as a management trainee in 1991, April. So then, in between, I can remember he was talking very emotionally on that time, the Janasavi program that he was supporting very much, then President. And later, I was able to work with him. I think he was chairman BUI, as an observer at the Central Bank office. I was chair. Then now, obviously, it's a CMA key person, and I'm here. Just a personal note, just to share with you. I was impressed by his speech, the emotions, and also the very independent views. So let me move on to the today topic that I had to speak on DDO impact. I think the last several weeks and months, we have been discussing about this, working on this, debating, and also still continue debates on the design on DDO, an impact on the DDO, and how successful, or why we need DDO, what is the kind of treatment that we have proposed in domestic debt optimization. Let me first say why this called optimization is basically, as Mr. Professor also alluded to, is that It is what is the optimum solution, how to optimize, looking at the overall impact on the each sectors, each structure, and all the areas. So that is why this is what we call optimization rather than restructuring of domestic sovereign rate obligations. So why we had to go first briefly, we all know our sovereign debt became obviously unsustainable. IMF determined back in 2020, March 1st time, announced when we asked for a rapid financing instrument during the COVID time, because our sovereign debt was unsustainable. They proposed some kind of restructuring, but that time it was not accepted. Somehow it came to a point there's no other choice we had to accept. And then we negotiated the program, and with the IMF, basically the parameters that for us to, once our sovereign debt became unsustainable, whole objective is to make our sovereign debt sustainable. That's the whole objective idea. And there are certain parameters that we agreed with the IMF for, based on their, what they call debt sustainability analysis. For our debt at end 2022, from 128% of GDP, debt to GDP, sovereign debt, including public obligations, other state loan, and to bring it down to below 95% overall public debt, including external and domestic. That is the overall debt target. Secondly, what they call gross financing need last year was about close to 34% of GDP. To make it sustainable, we had to bring it down below 13% of GDP during the period 2027 to 2032 on the medium-term basis. That's the second target for us to make it sustainable, overall debt, bring down the gross financing need from 34% to 13%. It's a sharp adjustment within a certain period. And third one, on the external debt side, also the external debt also both are not sustainable. Debt service payments that we had under normal circumstances before restructuring, 9%, 4% of GDP debt service payments, about $6 billion per annum, should be brought down to 4.5% of GDP. So these are the parameters under which we have to design the strategy, both domestic debt optimization and external debt restructuring. So when you look at the overall debt structure, it is almost 50-50. You have domestic 50 and you have external 50, roughly. So when you are to meet those targets, it's obvious that we have to make certain contribution from both sides. There are several ways the domestic sector can make a contribution. One is by taxation and reducing the primary deficit into a converting primary surplus. That is not enough. Then obviously you have to have some kind of optimization of domestic debt. Parallel with external debt restructuring. But when you're going to ask external creditors, those who have lent to Sri Lanka, out of their partly official credit is their taxpayers' money. The commercial credit is their fund managers, pension funds like our superannuation funds, that their money, and some private investors' money. When they ask from a foreign creditor, give us a relief, because we had not been able to maintain our own fiscal discipline. And first question they would ask, what is the assurance that you would come back, maintain fiscal discipline? We have to show that. That is where our commitment to bring down the debt targets. And we have to show that we are also making a contribution, serious contribution, genuine contribution, and credible contribution. And we have to show that we are serious and genuine on this. This is why it's important for us to convince the external creditors. We have to show that we are serious and genuine in this effect. This is where, in our strategy, that's why we thought it's important that we first show fiscal adjustment in terms of moving towards primary surplus through tax policies and other expenditure measures. And also in terms of domestic debt optimization, we are also making a genuine effort and showing that we have done our part. We have shown we have done, because when you have a bad track record, for you to gain the credibility, you have to show that you are doing it right. And you have to show that you are delivered. That is the argument why we thought it would be better that we first put our cards on the table, show that we are serious, and we have done this. Now, with some delay, obviously, there are a lot of challenges at the Supreme Court, at certain areas at the Parliament, and certain delays, but we have been able to overcome all these things. Now we are at the final stage of domestic debt optimization DDO. So let me touch on SIL because there's a debate going on. Because we want to make this process open as much as possible, open, transparent, and engage with all the stakeholders. We have been discussing and sharing information, discussing and listening to all the stakeholders, including the other stakeholders, government, the banks, the trade unions, so-called representatives of trade unions, and also EPF, and also some so-called independent research institution, all the things that we have been trying to engage with them. In that process, we still see some of the arguments. I think let me share some of the views on those. First one is, I think I have seen one argument, why central bank? What is the role of the central bank in domestic debt optimization? So because there could be a conflict in our functions. Let me share what are our functions. Why central bank should get involved in this designing, but it's a government decision and parliament decision and the Supreme Court clearance, but still the proposal, we have to be involved because central bank, on one hand, we have a regulator. One of the key objectives of financial stability. We have the responsibility to maintain financial stability as one of the key objectives. That's the first part. Secondly, under the EPF Act from 1950s, Central Bank has been, Monetary Board has been appointed as a custodian of the EPF fund. So we have to ensure there's a fair deal and protect the members of the EPF. On behalf of the members, we are the custodian. Thirdly, another statutory function given to the Central Bank from 1950 Central Bank Monetary Law Act is the agent for the public debt, agency function, raising financing for the government to finance budget deficit. There are three functions. Obviously, these three have conflict. So those are statutorily responsibilities that are in conflict for several years, over 60, 70 years that we have been dealing with that. So then now the argument is that because of that conflict, we should not get involved. I think in my view, that is the reason what we should get involved. We have been if there was a conflict, then you have to think about when Central Bank was established under Monetary Law Act in 1950, why Central Bank was given the responsibility of public debt management. There was a reason, if you read the EXA report, that gives the reason why Central Bank should involve in debt management at that time, because the certain economic conditions and market developments at that time. We have been having this now almost 73 years, having this function. Conflicting function of it. There's a conflict between monetary policy and debt management. We have been having that, but we have been doing this for 73 years under the responsibility given by the law. We have been doing it, but obviously there are certain times there are certain allegations that we have dealt with that, but still fairly reasonable, we have been doing that. And the EPF in 1956, when this was set up in 1956, still Monetary Board is entrusted with the responsibility of custodian. Over 50, 60 years we have been doing that. And we know at the Central Bank, we have this, how to manage conflict of interest last 70 years. And why can't we manage that conflict and responsibility? In this case, for this social domestic debt optimization, is one of the historical events that we are going to do, and one of the key important events of the history of this country. And we as stakeholders and statutory responsible institutions, Central Bank, we should certainly get involved in designing this thing. This just to ensure there's a proper balance and look at the impact of all stakeholders, including financial stability, banking sector stability, protection of EPF members, get their best possible deal, and also for the government to get the relief in terms of that relief to retain the sustainability. That is a overarching objective of everything. That is why central bank should get, that is where not necessarily Monetary Board also, as a governor central bank chairman of the Monetary Board, I was basically involved in designing all these things together with Minister of Finance and our advisors and the IMF. All we have been a much broader consultative process. Not only our proposal, it's a very broader consultative process. And when you do that, there is a process that we have market sensitivity, we have to protect the information. There could be manipulation, all these things. As a result, we designed this strategy very well and executed, although with delay that we have completed. So what is the, then obviously now recent debate we are seeing some of the people are raising whether there have been any other solution. But when you look at the determination of the Supreme Court on the tax amendment, it's a historical piece of determination to me. It clearly explains that people who went against an objection at the Supreme Court under fundamental right violations have failed to provide any alternative solutions. One can argue this is not fair, but when you look at the facts and the basis for the fairness in terms of taxation and in terms of each stakeholder's contribution to the just sustainability, there have been no alternative proposal. As a result, Supreme Court determined it's as a fair solution and gone ahead. Now the executive, legislature, and judiciary, all three branches of the key responsible institution have cleared, and now it's almost implemented. Then what is the obvious impact of the DDO? The concerns basically raise why only EPF, and there are a lot of bogus estimation by certain people saying it's going to impact. I think this is where I was able to explain to the Committee of Public Finance. We had a very constructive discussion and very useful discussion at the Parliament, where we were able to clear why this is justification, what is the impact, what they call, if you do not do the domestic debt optimization, there's an argument that status quo is that we don't do the domestic debt optimization. We do not get government would not get a relief for their debt service burden, but with the impact. I think because we all know debt is not sustainable. If you don't do something, obviously government will not be in a position to service their domestic debt, even domestic interest payments and the principal payments for treasury bills and bonds. Because we didn't have resources, we already announced the suspension of external debt in April last year. We didn't have any choice. We had to announce the debt moratorium suspension until we restructure, come to agreement with external creditors. So if we don't do that, then government certainly, in our estimate, would be compelled to announce something similar that will make situation everyone worse, including the EPF members and including the banking sector. Everyone else, all of your even money in the banking system, your deposits, your money will be at risk. So first objective is to look at the overall impact and have a balanced approach and have a fair approach in terms of contribution to the government coffers in terms of taxation. For the EPF to retain their concessional tax rate, and also government to be able to continue to service and make payments good in terms of both capital and interest payments, so that EPF would be able to give the members returns, sufficient returns, reasonable return compared to what has been given in the last several years. For example, now one assurance is that the balance will not be reduced by a cent, what is the member balances, and those balances will be at least growing at 9%, as we have seen last several years, there will be assurance 9% growth of your member balances will almost be guaranteed. If not in any circumstance, under any circumstances, there is a clause going to be in the government that they will finance whatever the deficit. So there's assurance for at least next 4 years. Future all will depend on what are the market interest rates, how is the APF portfolio going on. That's it, for too long to basically predict. But at least in the near future, during the program period, there's assurance. Members would get member balance will be protected, at least minimum 9%. I think we are confident on this. Our analysis says we should be able to give at least over 9% return in next couple of years, because the debt exchange gives us some additional step-up coupons for the new bonds in exchange for existing bond portfolio. It's only bonds, and the bill portfolio will be retained by the EPF and any other investment, so that we should be able to comfortably give this reasonable return. And this is where I think there's a misunderstanding. There are other ways that government can find this money. People can, several things being proposed. Why not the 900 billion of tax revenue, those are in areas would not be collected? I don't think in practical terms, those cannot, I mean, obviously we have no issue, those should be collected if there's any non-payment or avoidance of tax. But there are certain legal procedures that will not help the current government, that will not immediate issue of government meeting debt service obligation locally. There are a lot of other bogus arguments like, this under innovation, those are money not belong to Sri Lanka, that no one can claim that there's someone else's money, we can't claim. Likewise, there are several arguments, but I think, and there are several kind of estimates coming out with several so-called independent research institutions, misleading people. I think we have very clearly, open and transparent basis, told the parliament what is the impact if the status quo, even though there's no such status quo, if not restructured, what will happen, the choice EPF has is to participate and get the maximum and have a stability for the fund, or subject to taxation 30%, which would be a worst case. So that is where the Monetary Board, Central Bank will have to make, EPF will have to make a decision. They already submitted the offers. So that is where on the current issues, and obviously why not banking sector? We all know banking sector. Let me elaborate a little bit on that also. One is the banking sector in terms of taxation. Effective taxation is almost over 50%, the contribution in terms of out of their profits. Secondly, banking sector has already been adversely affected by the economic crisis in terms of debt moratoriums, in terms of stage 3 non-performing loans rising. But still they have been able to manage and effectively doing the financial intermediation process between depositors and the investors, or savers and the investors. Without that process, economy cannot function. And on top of that, banks also have additional burden in terms of their foreign currency obligations. Yeah, they will have to make certain contribution. There are certain provisions. As there's additional contribution, banks anyway will have to make under the external treasury occurring, as well as some of the foreign currency obligations. So there are several ways banks are contributing. And also if you look at the relief that banks have given to the SMEs and others in terms of debt treasury occurring, is huge. And so without a stable banking system, no one can guarantee any recovery, and if there's any impact on the banking system, we'll go back to a worse economic crisis more than what we had experienced last year. So banking crisis is the last thing that anyone would. Some argue that why don't we have an impact on the restructure some of the banking holdings and work out the recapitalization needs. It is not like mathematical calculation of restructuring certain bonds and putting back by the government recapitalization infusion. It's not the way that banks work. It's all on the trust and confidence. If you can remember, when we are going to announce this strategy, prior to announcing that, there are a lot of speculation on the stability of the banking sector and possible potential impact of the DDO on banking sector. A lot of speculation. And I can remember a lot of people asking questions and getting ready. Even we saw some of the withdrawals. People were, with some concern, started to withdraw money from the banks. We had to issue certain statement. That's why these are highly market sensitive. We had to have this window of certain holidays to announce it publicly and execute it on the first working day following the holidays. That's how we were able to manage. And now confidence is back. We can ensure, even with all these challenges, we can ensure going forward, bank sector will be stable. Bank sector is important to recover. In the recovery process, this is only a stabilization process. In the recovery process, banks will have to play a major role. When we relax monetary policy, without banking sector effective participation and effective financial intermediary process, this benefit of lowering inflation and benefit of that into the providing credit to the economy will not happen without a proper efficient banking system. This is one of the reasons we had to issue a circular to expedite the process and get the benefit to the economy, to the creditors, and while protecting the depositors, and while protecting the system of the the overall banking system, final system. So we have issued those instructions. I hope that with that, we can ensure going forward with the completion of DDO, and also I need to mention the contribution of the DDO by the central bank. And what we are looking at, the bringing down gross financial need from about what we call 34% of GDP now to below 13%, of which during that period, still 2027 to 2032 period, we needed from about 16% going down 13%. The contribution that DDO would make is 1.56%. Out of 1.5%, central bank contribution is almost 1%. Super response is only 0.5%, of which 0.1% in terms of interest payment, 0.4% in terms of extending the maturities for longer maturities for treasury bond portfolio. So I think this is one of the reasons why central bank should get involved, but there is an impact. And what is the feasibility of central bank, how much central bank can afford and sustain in the circuit process without having a serious impact on the balance sheet. Central bank stable balance sheet is also important for the confidence and trust of the system. And this is where we have looked at carefully the impact of central bank holdings. And once we restructure exchange into treasury bonds, what will be the impact on the central bank balance sheet? What are the implications on the ability to implement monetary policy and financial stability? And all analysis that we have done. This is where I'm proud as a government central bank that coming under central bank supervision, we have been able to make a contribution of whole 1.5%. 1% from the central bank balance sheet, 0.5% that under our custody, EPF has made the contribution to ensure EPF members' balances and return are protected. That is, historic moment in the DDO. While allowing banks to function and while allowing the economy to recover, once we come to stabilization, next important step, this beyond DDO, what is the next step? So once we've done the DDO, as I said, next one is we are shown to excellent creditors, so we have done our part. And we are parallelly negotiating with both the official sector under what they call official coordination platform with Japan, India, and China parallel going with the Paris Club, and also commercial creditors parallelly with the official ISP holders and other commercial creditors. That process going on. Now, we have shown our credibility and commitment, and this now we are hoping that our external creditors will do the needful. without taking too much time. We have, at the top level, the political level, we have a strong support, and we have commitment shown by leaders of those countries, and also creditor committees of the ISB holders. They have shown their positive indication and willingness to support. It's up to a time that we take the time, do the analysis, get everyone on board, and execute the next phase before the completion of next review on the IMF, so that we should be able to complete the, reach some agreement with the external creditors that will complete the near critical measures that we have to implement to complete the stabilization and move on a growth path on a steady basis after that. So that after that, the economy come back to normal situation. Government will get a relief in terms of both domestic debt service as well as external debt service. And we should be able to build up our reserves to a much more sustainable level going forward. And parallelly, there's strong commitment. I can see other speakers talking about addressing corruption vulnerabilities, addressing state-owned reforms, parallel structural reforms that we, when the IMF mission come in here for review next week, this is, one is to look at review the current progress and commit ourselves what to be completed before the first review, completion of first review, and then program for the next year. What are the structural benchmarks? What are the contribute targets that we have to negotiate? It's all process of negotiation. And this is where I think I want to add one more point, final point, is that there's another argument that Sri Lanka is the only or very few countries where superannuation funds are subjected to DDO. All I can say is that, if that was not done in Ghana or that was not done in Argentina or some other country, if we are to implement exactly what was done in some other markets, we don't need our expertise here. We have to design a strategy which is suitable for our country, looking at our own tax structure, looking at our own debt structure, looking at who can bear the burden, looking at the fairness. So I don't think anyone is arguing that because Ghana did not do that, because the Zambia did not do that, why did we do that? There's a reason. Because we have to understand our situation, we have to have this, design the solution that would be most suitable for our situation. That's why we, as Sri Lankans, our experts, have the best understanding of the situation here. That's how we have designed a unique solution which is suitable for Sri Lanka. If you are to accept whatever proposed by the IMF in their understanding or whatever done by the other countries, we don't need people here. We don't need experts here. That is the contribution I certainly value, recognize, and appreciate our central bank officers, the Minister of Finance officials, and support from the external creditors, as well as consultation with the IMF, and with all the stakeholders, even political leaders, including the President and their staff. So we have been able to consult and design the strategy, and what is most suitable for this country, and this is, in my view, DDO is the best design that we can have for this country. And I'm sure if we can implement both DDO and ADR properly, we don't need to go back to a second restructuring. Subject to that, we go in that path, not only the DDO, ADR, but also reform process, macroeconomic stabilization process, and going forward in this path. This is a very narrow path, as I always say. If we deviate from this path, we could fall into traps. That's why we have to manage this very carefully and strategically, and we should move on. People can, by looking at only one aspect, people can criticize. So we welcome constructive criticism. We are also willing to have open, transparent discussion. This is where I agree to at least to meet all the stakeholders, including trade unions, who claim they are representatives, but they are actually not. They are kind of arms of certain political interests. But still, we are willing to listen, have debate. But still, we will go on this path. I'm sure if we go in this path, I think we can come out of this crisis and we will never have to go back to the second restructuring, and we can restore the sustainability. But subject to that, we move in that path. If we deviate, obviously, no one can guarantee. That's why it's important for educated stakeholders like you to ensure that whatever the administration, make sure that we go on this path. That is the responsibility of the people of this country. So let me stop here. Thank you very much.